Welcome to this week's installment of Spotlight on Laurel County, Her History and Her People. Our guest today is Margaret Dyche Keith. It's great having you today. I'll begin as I always do, Margaret, by having you tell me some things about your family, going back maybe to your parents, your siblings, and then we'll go on into how Laurel County maybe has changed in those years since your youth.
Okay. I'm the daughter of Martin and Ruby Dyche, have one sister, Billie King. Grew up on 5th Street, right below the courthouse and behind the jail. Laurel County has changed greatly in my time. Main Street, as I was growing up, was very vibrant, a lot of activity. We all know that is no longer the case.
Right.
I would walk to London School. London had its own school system then, and that to me was one of the pitfalls of politics, that London is no longer an independent district.
Right.
But a lot of things have changed over the years.
Well, Main Street, London was the main artery. There was no I-75.
No.
And there was no, so, to get from point A to point B, but then there was also no strip malls. No shopping centers here, no 192 bypass. No. So yes, London downtown was really downtown is a small city in and of itself, because that's where folks went to market. That's where folks went to grocery shop for clothes, meet and be seen, courthouse, everything, the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
It all took place within 4 or 5 blocks.
Yeah. So always a lot of people.
Yep, and even the hospital was right there up the hill.
Yeah.
So everything was downtown.
Well, let's go into a little further into. So it's just you and Billie then, right?
Yep.
Okay, and let's go into then. And I was going to ask you this toward the end, but A.R. Dyche. And the Dyche family. There's no history of Laurel County series without naming the Dyche family. That's the name synonymous with London and Laurel County. It just is, and it branches out beyond your immediate family there. And not everyone has a cemetery named after them, and not just that, but the most famous and popular cemetery in Laurel County and even in these parts.
Okay, A.R. Dyche, of course, my great-grandfather.
So he was your great-grandfather. Okay.
He bought one of the papers, I can't say, back in that 1880, somewhere back in there. My grandfather, Russell Dyche, was born in the house I was raised in on 5th Street, and that was also the home of the paper. The paper was printed in that house.
In that house, and it predated Sentinel, and I think that was probably the Sentinel-Echo.
Well, I guess so. And then when my granddaddy took over, you're right. And then Pa came back like 1907, and started the London Sentinel, and then got the Sentinel-Echo back and combined the two. That's how you get the Sentinel-Echo.
Okay, wow. Okay. Now there's an interesting piece of history.
I would love to prove it. Of course, Bob Cato later bought that house, and they remodeled it, and so it can't be on the National Registry. But my gut feeling is that house might be the oldest house in London.
Really?
It would be one of the older ones, because we know it was there when my grandfather was born. And the Pennington house was the oldest house. That was built 1850s. But of course, that was torn down.
So this house would have been in the mid-1800s then.
Yeah.
It had to have been if your grandfather was born there. And,
now, when Mother and Daddy remodeled it when I was like 3, but they found an old hook that was used to hold up the press.
Is that right?
It was there. But now my sister Billie was born in that house too.
Okay, and that's where the paper was published.
Paper was published, and then it moved next door.
So the Dyche family had their pulse on what was happening in and around London, Laurel County. Yeah. Obviously, they were interested because they put the news out.
Yeah, and then when you talk about my grandparents' house, which is where Carnaby Square is, so of course Daddy's the one that sold that for the shopping center. So,
Wow.
and
That's next to the cemetery.
Drained. But that house was used when Goebel, during that assassination, the state government split, and part of it came to London, and they used that house kind of as headquarters.
Really?
For the Republican Party during that time.
That was the Kennedy assassination? Or?
No. Goebel, the governor.
Oh, the governor.
We had a governor assassination.
Okay.
And
so what years would that have been?
I can't remember, but Luke and I had no idea. But that was owned by a Parker family, and the Parker's daughter committed suicide, and that is the big monument out in the cemetery that you see. Her parents later divorced, and her father went to Washington State and became a U.S. congressman. And the daughter, who was kind of the clerk of the government when it was in London, what we didn't realize until she died, and they called to see if there was room to bury her here. She could have told us something about it. We had no idea she was living in Washington at that time.
Wow.
But
that's amazing.
But Pa got that the Masonic Lodge went bankrupt back in the 30s, and my grandfather bought the assets, and in that was a building on Main Street that he named the Pica Building. It later burned, and the cemetery.
Okay.
And then he named the cemetery in memory of his father.
Okay.
So that's how that came up.
In memory. So A.R. Dyche wasn't alive to see the cemetery be named after him.
No, he died in 1925.
Okay. All right.
And I can remember his widow. She lived on Main Street where it's a brick house that Sweetie Smith now owns. Coleman Reynolds tore down my great-grandmother's house, or great-grandfather's house, and built, it's a kind of a yellow brick house, about 11th Street, down there on Main Street.
Well, what's also, I think, ironic is the fact that we talked about the hustle and bustle of Main Street, okay? And the first strip mall that actually pulled some of that away from Main was Carnegie Square.
Yeah.
And I can remember, TG&Y was our Walmart.
Oh, yeah.
And Winn-Dixie was there, and I think Mama got her hair done there, and Grandma, and they'd shop for makeup there, and we had movie cinemas there, and ice cream, and so that was London's first. And the thing that's ironic about that is we just had talked about the hustle and bustle of Maine, and then Carnegie Square. So that changed. That began to change the landscape of our county at the time.
But I would spend every Friday night with my grandparents, and I kept my bike out there, so I would ride in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And so I know just about where everybody's buried.
Well, yeah, Russell Dyche is a household name, in London, Laurel County history, folklore, the whole 9 yards, So that's very interesting about the newspaper business, and that leads me into my next question. It's certainly noteworthy in any historical project to speak with a local newspaper owner. Now, that I'm sure comes with good, bad, ugly, beautiful, chaotic, sometimes sprinkle in a little turmoil, and then you got yourself a newspaper. You guys, you and your husband, Luke Keith, were brave enough to own the Sentinel-Echo for a time, and I don't know how many years, but you can tell me when that began and how that began and so forth, because it's a very interesting piece of history.
We bought it in 1974. It was in the family. It started in, I did the Centennial edition, 1873.
Okay.
And I put the Centennial edition out, 76, 77. It was a few years late. It had almost 200 pages.
Wow.
And
So you guys did all that research back at 100
Well, we
years.
used, my granddaddy had done a Diamond Jubilee edition
Okay.
in 54, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we used a lot of that. And then he did the Laurel County history, so that was, Laurel County history was done in connection with that Diamond Jubilee edition.
Okay.
So I used a lot of that, and then we just updated.
And you enjoyed putting those things together.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Because I love words and the way they fit together and reading and all that stuff. So I understand what you mean by that. But history too has I think has become very important to me as I've matured and gotten older and stuff, and I'm very interested in it now, how we got here and where we came from and all that stuff. But so you put that together, and you began in 1974. You guys actually purchased the newspaper, and so how long? When did you?
We sold it in '81.
Okay.
But Luke liked to roam. So anyway. But we had a lot of fun. I think we got some things accomplished during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Have a lot of good memories.
Well, it gives you clout too to get things done. I mean, really, and the beautiful thing is at that time, folks, if they wanted to market a product, obviously radio was a big thing, and TV was to a lot of people unaffordable at that time. But if you wanted to market, especially a local product, radio and newspaper was it. So that was kind of a golden era there. Now there's so many. You didn't even have billboard competition that much back then. You didn't have. You certainly didn't have the internet and everything that it's brought as far as marketing, and so times have certainly changed. But cutting edge marketing back then was done on the radio and in the newspaper.
Well, during that time, WFTG had a news director. Back, I don't know during that time frame, but Jim Parman did the news, and we would work with Jim, but we would always get so excited when we could scoop him on something.
Yeah, of course.
Because
it's competitive. You were trying to get
But we worked real well together, and
who's out first?
But you always like to get that scoop in.
Yeah.
But during that time too, we were just a weekly paper. We were the largest in the state. Had between 8,000 and 9,000 circulation, and we would average over 48 pages a week.
Yeah, it was a big paper.
And we would start putting that paper together.
That's
really
mind-boggling.
Really on Thursday, the back section. I always kind of worried me about some of the advertising that always kind of got stuck in the back. But one thing I was really always proud of, because election time can be very competitive.
Absolutely.
And I was always so very careful to make sure nobody could say we took preference over one candidate over another. So I kept a list of where every political ad went during that time, and they were alternated. If they were in the third section this week, they were in the second, the next one, first, and they had to pay to get in the first section. They had to pay 25% extra.
Yeah. Well, my hat's off to you for even thinking along those lines. Because a lot of folks wouldn't even have. They wouldn't have even thought of that. So.
But we got a lot of advantages back during that time. I don't know if they're still doing it. The National Newspaper Association always had a week in Washington, and we went. I can remember at least 2 times. And during the Carter administration, we got to go to the White House for a tea. The president was tied up and couldn't be with us, so Mrs. Carter had a tea party, and she was out with some friends or something. Was running really late, and we had nationwide, and the Wisconsin crowd. They had a good time, and one of them got on the piano. We when the president wasn't there, you had full run of that main floor.
That's amazing.
You could go in any room, and
so you were a small town newspaper, but you got just as much preference as the big city newspapers when it came to that.
and one of them got, started beating on the piano, and Horowitz, one of the big pianists, had given a concert the night before,
Wow.
and everybody was like,
Yeah. Those are things you never forget. Yeah.
But I can remember during that session, we got to hear every cabinet member speak. Every cabinet member spoke to us. And then I think we were there again, and maybe it was Carter, whoever, we were restricted to the East Room. And then during the Reagan administration, we were in another area of the White House, and both the Reagans and the Bush, Vice President Bush, he was Vice President, was there. And he was kind of standing to himself, and Luke went up to him and told him about Neil having come through London, and Luke had taken Neil to Dyke Drug to eat lunch. And Bush said, "Well, I hope you're don't want your money back." He said, "I don't have 50 cents on me." So,
not many people can say that,
that was but I can remember too, right at the end of Nixon's time, Gerald Ford came to London to speak to the Lincoln Day dinner, and it was at the high school.
Yeah.
And we always worked real well with Courier Journal. And if they had something going on in this area, they would use our darkroom. And the photographer was there, and I was down there with him, and I just had on blue jeans or something. And I took him to the high school to get film, and he said, "Don't you want to go in and see Ford?" And I said, No.
Really?
I'll sit in the car.
Yeah.
2 months later, Ford was president.
You missed a good chance there. Oh, that's great. So now your grandparents, Russell and May, but those times, and you all call it the big house. And it's funny because the big house in my lingo and language, there's a museum now. It used to be the house where the Allman Brothers Band were in Macon, Georgia, and they call that the big house, and there's always been called the big house. But Laurel County has its own big house, and it was the Dyche family. That's, as you said, where Carnaby Square now sits. So a lot of good times in the big house. Yeah. And you were the caretaker for your grandfather.
Well,
or one of them.
We went home from school. I was a senior in high school, and Daddy said, "Pack your bags. We're moving at 5 o'clock."
And you so that morning you went to school. You didn't expect that.
But Mother had just redecorated the house I grew up in. We had new carpet, new furniture. No, we were just looking forward to it, and we.
Yeah, this was mid-'60s.
Yeah, no, it was 59.
59, okay, 59.
And here we at 5 o'clock. We went
Wow.
to my grandparents' house to live.
Yeah, your grandfather had become ill.
He was dying, and they could not find anybody to take care of him. So we went out, and Mother and Daddy were the caregivers until he died.
Okay. Well, now you make your home in Hazard now, but you still visit here almost weekly, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
I'm still working, so I'm over here.
Okay. You still. That's great, and you're still working. What's your occupation now?
I work in credit cards.
Okay.
Credit card processing.
Okay. Well, the old Dyche family home on 5th, the Cato office. Okay.
Now it's.
And you think it might be the oldest home in London?
Well, that's just my gut feeling. Because I can't think of any other house standing that might be older. Mm-hmm. But now somebody else might very well know of one that is.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the water tower house.
Oh,
That's an interesting
my granddaddy owned the water system, and like Carla said,
What was it called?
London Utility.
Okay.
Utility.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can remember as a child, if we had an electrical storm, he had different employees, and everybody had their own well to babysit during that storm. And Daddy had one on East 4th Street, and that was Manchester Street then. And he would have to go sit by the well in case lightning struck. But my granddaddy, they called that Waterworks Hill. That's what it was called. And he built that reservoir up there. It was 3 feet, the walls are 3 feet thick. And Daddy bought it from the city. I can't remember, 72, somewhere in there. And I can remember one day and he was so intent watching them cut out because it was steel reinforced, and cutting out for the window downstairs.
Wow.
And
yeah. You still remember watching them do that.
Yeah.
That was around 1972, 73.
Yeah, somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay.
Because Faye and Charlie Schaefer moved back to London, and Charlie went to Daddy and said, "How much would you take for your house?" They lived out by the country club. And Daddy thought it was pricing it so high that Charlie wouldn't touch it, and he bought it. And Luke and I had started housekeeping in the Pica Apartments, the Pica building on Main Street. And Mother and Daddy moved into our apartment.
Yeah.
when we bought our first house, and that was in 71.
Okay. So the times of, the Carnaby Square coming in here, and of course the Sentinel-Echo, you guys were owners of that. And during those 70s, we can't imagine now how times were back then, and you try to tell the kids about it and stuff, but those are the times that I grew up in. And those were really, compared to the 50s and 60s, the 70s was an age of, it's like the technology age of today. Those were really slick times. I mean, that was a time of evolution, a lot of evolution.
Well, coal was booming.
Yes. There was a lot of money circulating.
Even though London is certainly not in the coal area, a lot of that money made its way over here.
It did. Well, and there was coal stripped off of some Laurel County strip pits and stuff. There wasn't a lot of deep mining here, but there were some, especially in the northern part of Laurel County,
And then Greer, Brother and Young were going strong. They built all I-75, other interstates.
What were times like when that was? Because, see, folks now, and I find this very interesting. We can't imagine a world without an interstate highway system. And I can remember 192 being, the bypass. I remember driving on it when I first got my driver's license. So that's how old it is. But that was a cool thing that went in there. I remember a lot of things were, you're dragging dirt bikes where Walmart is. But you lived through the interstate highway, and folks couldn't imagine what we have these days. And the funny thing about the interstate system is it's 50 years old.
It opened, interstate opened in, it seems like November of 69, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so we're coming up on 50 years of an interstate highway system in the United States, east to west and north to south. And it's a beautiful thing. Of course, it's advanced society as much as the internet ever has or did or will. Yeah. But we've outgrown it now.
Oh yeah.
We don't have. There are too many cars for the lanes of travel that we have. I mean, it's funny. It's 50 years old, and now it's almost like it's starting to be dated. But let's go back to those times. That was exciting, knowing as a you were in your 20s, I guess, and and that was exciting knowing that this was coming.
Well, and anybody that was driving back then, of course, US 25 was almost like a parking lot. You can imagine. I mean,
it was a main thoroughfare. Yes.
It was a main thoroughfare, and it was slow going. When I would come, if I had to go to Lexington or something, when I would come home, I would get off at Mount Vernon, turn at Mount Vernon, and go the old road, and come in 472. Take that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because of 25. Yeah, because
or
of the traffic there.
Wherever,
Right.
Yeah.
The traffic on
Livingston,
25. Right. Yeah.
And it would save me all kinds of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember the night they opened I-75, I had an apartment on Main Street. And I thought, oh, tomorrow night's going to be wonderful. We're not going to have all this traffic. Well, there was no change, really. I mean, there was
folks
still...
were afraid of that thing.
Well, I know that
you know,
it was
they
just
were,
as
it was
loud
like
the
a
next
great
night.
big foreign monster to them. How can we drive on, you know, we're used to driving on a 2-lane road, not a 4-lane road where, I mean, you know, it was intimidating to folks. I've heard other people say that, you know. It took folks a while to get used to that.
It, yeah. But,
you know. And so back in those days, the Lexington trip was 2 to 3 hours easy.
Oh, yeah.
A Corbin trip was going on maybe, if you get there in 45 minutes, you were doing well just because of the traffic situation.
Well, I mean, it's strange thinking of the paper. When I was growing up, and if you went to Lexington, of course, the Sentinel had a column, you know, social column, what this one, so-and-so did, so-and-so, you know, somebody to entertain, yada, yada. And if you saw anybody in Lexington, it'd be in the paper the next week. Oh, you know.
That's neat. Yeah, yeah. Big time. Big time.
That was news.
Something that sticks out about your time as a newspaper owner, editor, publisher. You guys did the whole 9 yards. You know, but something, even a couple of things. But what is the most? It can be funny. It can be you know, shocking. What do you remember the most about your time? Any news event or something happening?
Well, I'll bring up 2 things. One good. Well, there were more, but anyway.
Sure. Yeah, there were several. Just something that stands out.
Because you were talking about clout, Luke got, of course, the road from London to Somerset named for Russell Dyche, which Russell Dyche had put together Kentucky 80. Back in the 40s and 50s, there was no continuous east-west highway in the state of Kentucky. And he worked long and hard to get Kentucky 80 put together. So we thought it very fitting that part of that road get his name. Well, the night that Governor Carroll came to dedicate it, he announced that they were going to build the bypass.
Okay. So he came to dedicate the new 80, what we call new 80. Now it's not new anymore. And an interesting factoid side note about that is my father helped engineer the new 80 there. I can remember the times going on job with him back then. So folks didn't know that the 192 bypass was coming.
We've been begging for it, and I'm not going to go into any details, but everybody thought somebody was really working hard on it, and evidently they hadn't been doing their job. And Luke the governor had said, "Is there anything else you all need?" And Luke said, "Yeah, we need a bypass."
That's
and
amazing.
he announced it that night. So, you know, that was good.
Absolutely. It's been so beneficial, but we've almost outgrown it now. I mean, you hit that out here on Friday afternoon at 5. It's like you're in L.A. It's bumper to bumper, wall to wall, you know. And so it's progress, but you pay a price for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, Luke was always very anti-union. So anytime there was a vote coming up, Laurel Grocery, Griffin Pie or something, there was a fella that the companies would hire to come from Bristol, Joe Lawson, and Joe would get with Luke, you know, and Luke would write some editorials. And during
there was a lot of influence there.
And
obviously
during it was voted at Kern's Bakery, and one of the employees came in and said, "I just heard behind the courthouse they're going to blow up the building."
Wow. So what did you do with that?
Well, we called the police and reported it, and I had ATF at the house. We shipped the kids off that night, and of course nothing happened. But so you know. Yeah. Well, you know, but
I think with influence as a newspaper owner, editor, publisher, all that comes with influence comes responsibility. You know, and certainly you guys lived up to that, but that's kind of a load sometimes. You know, and then you talk about the union folks, you know, and folks saying, why don't you write this in the paper? And why don't you not write that in the paper? You know, why don't you, hey man, you remember me, buying your lunch in grade school, can you leave my son out of this arrest report that you have that.
Yeah.
You have that to deal with. As I said, with influence comes responsibility.
Yeah.
And that can be kind of heavy sometimes, I would imagine.
Yeah. We went,
especially in those days.
We went down, we lived on top of the hill, one day, election time, and here was a rooster hanging from a tree.
Wow. Yeah. And see, that was the internet then for folks. The newspaper was the internet. That was where they got their news, so they hung on every word that it said.
But we did some good. I know the city had an employee that was killed in an accident one day, and Sunday Luke didn't have anything to do, and he got on the phone and called businessmen all over town, and they raised like $4,000 to bury him for his funeral expense.
Yeah. And those are good things. That's really good. That's, as I said, with influence comes responsibility. And that's some of the good things that you can look back on.
He fought hard for the new sewer plant, and Carla was talking about smelling it last night. So. But
it's never a pleasant smell.
You can remember growing up, it used to be very, very bad.
Yes. So, interesting things that happen in the newspaper business, and I understand there's a story about you two young daughters, okay, and maybe one of them had heard from a friend at school that her father wasn't all that pleased with her father because of something that he put in the newspaper, okay, or said in the newspaper. So, you have a kindergartner, I think?
First or second grade.
And the newspaper is a busy place. There are people in there doing this, that, and the other, and so it's full of people. Yeah. And these little girls bust in the door, and one hollers at her father. With,
she came in. We had office supplies in, and she came in that door, which big storeroom, and no telling who was. It could have been
anybody. Yeah.
I don't know who was up there, because Luke's office was kind of behind that, and she hit the door and she hollered out, and I'm just going to use letters.
Well, she used an expletive.
Yes. Yeah. She said, "Hey, Dad, what's an SOB?"
Yeah.
He came. She said everything, and he came running out. "Catherine, where did you hear that?"
This is a little bitty kindergartner,
Well, she was first or second. Yeah. And she said, "Well, my friend, I walked up the street with her, and she said that's what her daddy called you."
And then Luke had some explaining to do. That kind of put him on the spot there. So that's wonderful, and that's a good way to wrap this up. But Margaret, I can't thank you enough. You've been wonderful today, and we're trying to do the history of Laurel County, and you've certainly added a great deal to that, and I'm very much appreciative of that.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.